Welcome to another episode of the Profitable Home Services Podcast. This is the podcast where we dig deep into the profit and the cash flow leaks in your home service business. We're so glad you could join us. Today, our guest is Michelle Scribner. Sorry about that, Michelle.
No problem.
Michelle is a great friend of mine. I'm going to be completely transparent here. She's not my typical podcast guest. She and I are both Profit First Mastery Level members, as well as seasoned in the world of accounting, bookkeeping, cash flow, all those types of things. And we thought we would team up today and bring you a case study from a company that I had the privilege of finding out about recently. A company who had a big surprise and they didn't know it was coming. So with that as a teaser, welcome, Michelle.
Glad to be here with you, Diane.
So also in complete transparency, Michelle and I are part of the Profit Plus Academy group. And that is an online course company where we create online courses for small businesses. And we are both passionately committed to helping small businesses become more profitable, grow their business, become more successful, have a better life.
It's amazing how much knowledge that we have that we think is no big deal. And then as we share it, realize that it is kind of a big deal, and that just sharing our expertise can help so many entrepreneurial people. So
Michelle, let me share the story that I came across this last week. And to keep this company anonymous, we're going to call the guy Fred. And we're going to say that he owns ABC HVAC Company. We're just going to keep it totally anonymous to protect his identity. The story I came across this last week was that Fred had this in-house controller, accountant, bookkeeper, whatever term you want to give this person. And this person had complete control over running the office. They paid the bills, they made the deposits, they reconciled the bank account, they did all of that stuff. Everything was going fine until Fred got a phone call from his number one vendor, his biggest supplier for his materials, that said, "We can't fill this last order you guys placed because your account is delinquent. We're going to have to put you on hold." Fred was devastated. "What do you mean? How can this happen? We pay our bills every week. How in the world could this happen?" And that was the scenario we walked into. And I know in your career, many, many years of working with small businesses, you've encountered similar things. And I thought if we just put our heads together, we could come up with possibly some ways that they can mitigate the risk of something like that happening. Because the home service businesses that I come across usually have a gal or a guy in their office that takes care of pretty much everything. And they don't always understand their financials. They don't know how to read that balance sheet or that P&L. Forget about the cash flow statement. They don't know how to understand these things well enough to say something's off. They just don't have that knowledge because they're really great at what they do. They're not accountants. And that leaves them in a vulnerable spot. So I thought we could do a little bit of brainstorming of ways we could mitigate the risk. And then once we've kind of talked through that, maybe we can come up with some ideas on what you should do if you think something like this might be happening in your company. Because as all things on this podcast, we bring everything back around to a profit leak. And this could potentially be a humongous profit leak for Fred. Now, we don't know. We're not in deep enough yet to know. But it could be a huge profit leak if your number one supplier says we're cutting you off. That's thousands of dollars that go through there every month. Something is wrong, but Fred doesn't know what.
Exactly. This is a great topic. We've even seen it in a company before. Same thing happened, but it was a delivery guy on the other side that was taking the checks.
Oh,
and
no.
Taking it back to the company. He had something on the side going on. So you look at this and say, every time you've got money changing hands, that where you're paying a bill or you're receiving money, whatever it might be, is that as a business owner, it takes just put one extra thought into that. What could possibly not go correct? And what are the little things that I can do to just take that risk away? So in our case, where the way we found out was that we compared they were always asked to give a signature. I'm dropping off the supplies and they had to sign for it, or the person who was there. And we traced it back with some investigation and obviously not very pleasant experience, but we're able to see where was the fraud in all of this in that case. So when you've got somebody inside of your business that has control of your credit cards or your bank accounts, then there needs to have that extra step of what could possibly go wrong, because nobody cares about your money as much as you do. And you know what? It's a lot easier. It's really fun to spend somebody else's money.
Mhm.
And so just remember that if it's in somebody else's hand, that their sense of how much money there is or the consequences it's never as great for that other person as it is for you as the owner.
Well, and I think that in today's digital world, it's harder for an owner to find this out versus the days when everybody wrote checks and the owner was the person who signed them. At
Yes.
least that person got to see the check and hopefully the backup to it.
Yeah.
But at least they had some sort of a general idea of what the money was for. Now, so many things are paid online. They're paid through bill pay. They're paid through a credit card online, that owner is almost completely out of the financial loop so often.
Yeah,
And I think that's really scary on what could happen.
it is. Are the financial statements, and those owners that really know their financial statement and look at them, that can be one of the first places that there's an aha moment. But if the discrepancies are happening from the person who also controls or creates the financial statements, it might not be apparent, but you know where it will be? In your bank statement.
Yes.
Because you can go through and you can see the bank statement, say, what's going on here, or this doesn't quite make sense, or have somebody explain, someone in charge of it, just say, I'm not quite sure about this. So sometimes that bank statement or the credit card statement, just a quick perusal might alert you to something that might be different. And it doesn't have to it doesn't have to take place every month, but it could be every so often. Or getting online and just looking really quickly through your online bank account.
Give you an example of a company that happened many years ago when I was still down in California. The in-house bookkeeper was under terrible financial pressure in her home. Her husband had quit his job and the pressure was just terrible, and she didn't know which way to turn. And it started out being a utility bill. Slide hers in with his and push it off to the utility company. Then pretty soon it was added on. Okay, that one went through, no, and nobody caught it. Then she added on a phone bill, small stuff to begin with, and then her insurance. And then it started snowballing from there. And by the time this was all discovered and documented, she ended up going to prison for, I think it's 5 years that she served. And then she was on probation for many years after that. But all because she got backed against the wall because her husband quit his job and she was trying to keep from losing their home.
Wow.
And we don't realize the backstory on our employees sometimes. We don't know what's going on at home. And in your case, it was a delivery person. It wasn't even an employee, but we don't know their backstory. We don't know the intense pressure they might be under.
Right.
And sometimes a business's checkbook, especially if there's any money in it, they'll never know. They'll never catch that.
Especially when as owners, we are very trusting and we've got other very high critical things that need to be addressed. And so it's not that we have that extra time. One of the great features right now is that it is easy to scan receipts and attach them to your books, or to have them in a way that is very easy to see, especially in your financial statements. And if you've got someone who is more admin, like an assistant who their whole job is just to attach receipts to what is in the books. That's a good way of having a second set of eyes, so that when you see a certain amount and it doesn't match up, then it's, I don't know what to do this, and bring it. It's kind of a little bit of a quality control that takes place there. And that is really a way, especially when you've got in cases where debit cards or credit cards are given to other employees or members of your team, then asking for those receipts are very, I think it must happen, because unlike the case with the bookkeeper slipping in their utility, well, how many employees slip in when they're getting gas, an extra little candy bar or whatever else, and it makes you very aware of what's going on, and stop it before it snowballs, or correct that behavior, so that it's not, I mean, that's a candy bar is a little leak, but it's a drop of profit that just went to somebody else's.
And you
stomach.
multiply that out over 10, 15 employees,
Yes.
and maybe it's a candy bar, a pack of cigarettes, and a soft drink of some sort. Now that's 10, 12 bucks, 15 bucks, depending what they got, times 10 or 15 guys. Hey, if one guy can do it, I can do it too.
Absolutely.
And for those who aren't running some sort of a GPS camera type system in their vans and in their trucks, how often do they swing back through with a personal vehicle and fill up?
Oh, yeah.
Big
That's
profit leaks there that we've seen over the years.
I'm going to say another way for a business owner to protect themselves is when we look at financial statements, it's all lumped in there. And so if there are categories that where expenses can go through, then ask for the detail. And it doesn't give you the receipt, but it would show, give it the example that I've got is, we had a plumbing company that they said, of course, we'll buy your coffee for you. Well, it turns out that every guy was going back to McDonald's 3 or 4 or 5 times a day for their free coffee, of which it didn't look like much because it's only a couple dollars. But when we broke out the detail for 1 month, it went for a whole page, and you see the time, 5 times. And of course, the credit card was on there as well. And again, it wasn't, it was, boy, I just got taken advantage of here. When we looked at it as a whole, it didn't seem much, and it didn't creep. It wasn't like a big jump from 1 month to the other, but that detail and showing the by date what was going on really shone a light of what was happening.
I've often wondered if it's possible or probable that we can segregate some duties within a business, that the person who's placing the order isn't the person who's reconciling the bank account. The person who's charging things isn't the person who's reconciling the credit card. And this is where possibly an outside bookkeeping firm or an accounting firm steps in and helps with that one piece, just for a different set of eyes. It says, wait a minute, why do we have such a big charge to McDonald's? Or why do we have, this doesn't make sense with what we're seeing here.
Sometimes the person in-house that is in charge of restocking the office supplies slips things in for themselves as well. And so anytime you see that where someone has control of all from the beginning, middle, and end, it is an area where it's like, okay, I've put myself at risk here of something not correct happening. I'm going to say the other thing that is a real red flag is if you've got someone who never wants to take a vacation. Oh, I just can't. That, we hear that, but it's really because they're the only ones that are keeping it all going. And as a business owner, we tend to think like, I am so lucky to have someone who is so dedicated to my company. But it should be a red flag of, wait a minute, why can't somebody else step in and sit there in your shoes for the week or the 2 that you're off, or even you as a business owner?
That would be a big red flag.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen that a couple times in my career, where somebody goes on vacation and we find out all kinds of stuff while they're gone.
Right. Yeah. Because they're not there to cover it up as much. Yep.
There's just so many ways.
As a bookkeeping company, we do offer that, where a lot of times that high level just to come in and oversee it. We're not there in the day-to-day functions, but that's, like you said, that extra set of eyes that is outsourced by a neutral party. That helps. There also are, if you are concerned about it at all, if anyone listening to this is like, I think this might be happening, then you can ask for bookkeeping evaluations. Will you please go in here and see anything? And a lot of times things will show up that way. Wait a minute, this didn't clear the bank. There's, we've got a client that they've got a little shop in the front of their warehouse so that somebody can come in and get those. And all the time we're saying, this went through the cash register system, but it never hit the bank. And it started off with, $20, $30, and it went to 200. Now it's up to 2,000 of like, it's not hitting the bank. It's not hitting the bank. And the poor business owner was like, oh, it's okay. We sometimes we go get treats or whatever. And as bookkeepers, we're like, we'll bring back the receipts so we can, because bookkeepers like everything to just be perfect. But when it started getting greater and greater, there seemed to always be an excuse of why that was happening instead of there's really something happening. It's happening too frequently. And one time we can see it, but when it's something that you're seeing a pattern, then it's worth investigating, stopping what you're doing and say, all right, what of my money is leaking out and how is it leaking out here?
I always say these silent, hidden profit leaks are kind of like having maybe a leak under your bathtub or something in your house. You don't know it's there till all of a sudden the floor is wet. And that could take months before it's wet enough that you would notice it.
Yeah.
Silent little drip at a time leak. But over time they add up and they can be thousands and thousands of dollars. And that's your money that walked out the door, that leaked out of your business. So Michelle, what other instances have you seen over the years?
I think another way that you can mitigate your risk is to go through, and I think this is a good practice for all businesses, to have standard operating procedures or systems. And so you go to whomever is over that and say, I want you to, piece by piece, how, if somebody were to come in, if you won the lottery and you don't come to work next week, what would somebody need to do to go through this system? And having them give you that is great for you and your business because it just is the training manual for whomever else would come in. But as a business owner, you're looking at that and saying, wait a minute, this looks a little bit off here. So if there's something, or if you get any pushback on that. So
especially if they push back.
If they push back, then it's like, okay, what's really going on here?
Yeah. What's the real reason you're pushing back?
Exactly. I think the other thing that you can do is those relationships with your vendors. You can ask, just like in that case, he was alerted because he must have had a good relationship with his vendor for the vendor to pick up the phone. But you can also include yourself. I'd like to be included on all, email notices, even though that may create an inbox that is awful. You don't have to read through everything. You can just keep an eye on it. It's like, all right, that balance is going up, or wait, what's going on, or whatever it might be. That kind of keeps you in the loop as well.
There's so many ways.
I know. I think this is what our banks are doing now too, and our credit cards, is that they found another way to get you, the owner, to say something different is happening on this, because of the fraud that exists out there in the world, not just inside your company. And so think about it that same way. What do I need to be alerted, or even just somebody's just checking on this? Again, back to the email, or so that you just have that notice. And they may feel very bothersome, but how nice to catch it before too much happens. Or like in this case where it's a real problem.
And we don't know what the outcome will be because we're too early into the situation.
Yep.
So something else that would be interesting too is to cross-train a couple employees, especially in your office. Cross-train them. I have seen in the past that when you say we're going to cross-train somebody else on your job, that person's like, because they know they're going to get found out.
Yes.
I take that new person a while, but they will find it out because they're learning that job.
because
And
it
I'm
just,
a big proponent of cross training, so that if you can go on vacation or you get sick, somebody else knows how to do your piece, your part of the pie. But I've seen a couple of them with that panic look on their face when we say we're going to cross train.
yes, yes,
Makes them really, really nervous. And
it
that's
does.
something your antennas should be going up if they're getting nervous about their position being cross trained.
Hmm.
What's potentially hiding there?
Right.
So we've talked just briefly, if we think something might be wrong, what are some of the steps that we ought to start looking at? Got to start somewhere.
Yeah.
We don't call the police first thing. That's not the very
No,
first
don't
step.
call the police. And I don't even know if if it's an internal person that you suspect, or you're getting the vibes that something might be there. I don't know if it is wise to alert them right away either.
I wouldn't. Yeah.
No.
I tend to say, let's start digging into your financials. Find a good bookkeeper, an accountant, somebody who is willing to get in there and dig into those financials for you. That's going
Exactly.
to ask for copies of receipts. And we can come up with a reason we're doing a business evaluation. That's
Yes.
all it takes, is that we're doing that type of thing. And we're not calling it an audit, because that would really flip the person over the edge. But
Yep.
we're having a business evaluation done, and we're digging into our financials.
Yep.
And with that, that gives somebody like Michelle or myself a chance to have permission to open doors that we might not be able to open otherwise with your
Right.
internal person.
Yep, that's a great, and you can even, instead of saying evaluations like, I'm taking this challenge for profitability, and I'm really going to dig into every little piece here, and I just want to, I'm bringing in an expert to just evaluate again, or just look at where is my profitability and if there are some changes that I can make. So
Yeah.
it's very non-threatening way, because it's a positive.
Yeah, or a profitability assessment or something along
Mhm.
those lines. We can use
Exactly.
all kinds of words.
Exactly.
But that gives us permission to ask questions that they would get nervous about or suspicious about if we ask them otherwise. But
Exactly.
if we can tie it into something like that, the door gets open to here, we're going to ask some questions.
Yep. I'm going to
And
say the other thing to start, when, in addition to just the examination or pulling in someone, that pull up historical pieces. See if your business has been around for a while, and COVID really screwed up things. So you might not be able to go too far back, but maybe 2019 was it a real stable year, and go back and say, what was I paying there in this category and on your financials, and what am I paying now? And if there's any real differences or a pattern that you see, that we know inflation has gone up and materials have gone up, but if there are other things in there, it's like, wait a minute, this doesn't look quite right. It might just be another thing where you can just say, all right, that might be where I start. Because it could be very overwhelming as a business owner to say, I don't even know where to start. So where the person or people might have control of the financial piece, and then kind of honing down in on what else might be.
another area, if you can get some sort of a detail type report, is look to see on particular expenses that maybe only happen once a month. Do we have 12 or do we have 14
That's a great.
or more? Those types of things. Or if we know that we normally pay our supplier once a week, are we holding that pattern in the detailed amount?
Yeah.
Do we have somebody on the inside of the other business who we're pushing an extra payment through and they're grabbing it on the other end? Sometimes you'll find spouses or boyfriend, girlfriend, or good friends. One works at your company, one works at the other company, and they'll divert funds. I've seen that happen before.
It's hard, Diane, when you're an honest person and an ethical person, to even fathom the lengths that people go to be dishonest. I think, on a regular basis, I just, my jaw drops of like, wow, in a million years, I wouldn't think that. But that's when you're honest, you don't think that way. And so it is tough to even suspect or know where to start, or imagine that the lengths that people go to in order to justify taking some of your money.
Many years ago now, I had a client who was a church, and they would put their mail in a mailbox outside on the road. They were not in a big city or anything, but just kind of a little bit more rural. And there was a guy who stole their mail a few times. And his girlfriend worked at the bank that they happened to bank at. And so their check to the workers' comp, which was our state insurance fund, got cashed at the bank. And we kept saying, how does a workers' comp check get cashed by somebody other than state insurance fund? How?
Sure.
How do those things happen? And he happened to get a few others as well. But that one was the most obvious because we got a past due notice. But yet the check cleared the account, and come to find out, he and his girlfriend were working together.
Interesting.
She got fired, obviously, from the bank, but they got quite a few people's checks through that way.
Mhm.
But who would have thought that you'd have an insider at the bank? Now things are more digitally processed now. That was back in the days when they touched real checks.
Right.
But it's like, I would never think of that.
No.
It was just bizarre that they had that
that they would go that length.
Huh.
And another area that we haven't even talked about is inventory.
Oh,
And
definitely.
so when you've got inventory there and there isn't a regular accounting of that, or more than one person involved in that, then you can have leaking of your things that cost you money that you have to replace because someone has helped themselves to whatever inventory there is there. So
Especially out on job sites and things where
yes,
you're not physically there, where you don't walk past it every day.
exactly.
And they walk
There's
off.
not- Oh, go ahead. You go right.
I had a restaurant client several years ago who we could not figure out why we couldn't get those food costs down. She was doing everything that she could to get those food costs down. And so finally we had her put a camera out by the dumpster. And come to find out, her people were taking prime ribs and things like that, and they were sitting them beside the dumpster, and then their friend would show up with a car and cart them off very quickly. But until she put the cameras out there, we could not get the food costs down. It's like, what is going on?
Yep.
And she was just mortified that that was happening in her restaurant.
Of course.
So people get very creative when they are looking for money. And I'm thinking with today's prices and the inflation that's going on in our economy, it's going to make people think about this kind of stuff. And we're not doing this podcast to give people ideas, but we're doing it so that the business owners can be thinking and your antennas up and you're paying attention so you don't get caught in this type of a trap.
Yeah. We had a roofing company that they subcontracted all the work, but provided the project manager to be there on site. And so they had to get down to every job doing the inventory because there were half a dozen shingles or other pieces that the subcontractor just decided they would just put it in the dumpster pile with all of their other things and haul the dumpster pile off. And so the project manager had to take a step and say, no, we've costed this out. We know exactly what I should have remaining from what I brought on the site for you today. And if I don't see that, I need to see where it went. And that was just something that there was a thought that it was happening. And it's hard to, when in the moment, to call somebody out on it. That puts you in a very vulnerable or awful situation. And so they just changed their policies right away, communicated it up front, and then kind of put a halt on it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it wasn't this huge amount of money. It was, maybe $40 each time, but it adds up. And we're talking about those leaks. So
those silent leaks.
Yep.
Well, if you think that something like this is happening in your business or maybe happening in your business, I would say start documenting, start paying attention, listening to conversations, documenting things, checking emails, checking receipts, document and start building a file. Don't say anything to the person. You need to have a good case put together before you ever say anything to anybody outside of maybe your very small trusted circle. That you've got to document, because if it is severe enough that you turn it over to the local law enforcement, they have to have a solid case before they can go after this person on wherever they might be within your business. But keeping really good notes, good copies, good, recording conversations, whatever you might have to do to build a case on this, and notify your financial institution, notify your bank, your credit card. You can change passwords. You can do things like that to pull that control back to you and not necessarily just the one person who's in your office.
Yeah.
And then when it's time, report it. Report it to your local law enforcement, but make sure you've got really good, solid case before you report it. Because once you report it, here comes the confrontation.
Yes.
And it's going to get nasty.
Yeah.
There will be no good outcome. So make sure that we've gotten everything you can get before we go as far as reporting anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then let the law enforcement handle it. And try not to let the emotions get out of hand, because it's easy for us to go to an emotional state. I can't believe you did this to me. And we have to try to keep that part of it separate and stay within the bounds of, here's the facts of what we found so far.
Yeah. If we equate it to as a person, if someone that you knew came into your house, went into your wallet, grabbed your money and walked right back out the front door, how the emotion, you might have the emotion, but at that same time, you'd just be like, you're stealing. And so that is what's happening here in your business at whatever level it is. They've come into your business, that violation. Think of it as if it were your safe place where your family resides. The emotion you would have would not be, oh, I just feel so sad that this happened. It would be, no, irate. This is unimaginable, and the authorities need to get involved.
And then let them take it from there. But at some point, you're going to have to communicate with your team. They're going to have to know what happened, what's going on, especially if they see the police officers come into your business. They're going to have to understand what's going on. Here's what we've discovered, and here's the change in policy. Here's the change in procedures. Here's the change or whatever we've done to keep this from being able to happen going forward.
Yeah.
And keeping that team morale up, not letting them all start pointing fingers at each other. Well, why didn't you see this? And why didn't you say that? Bob's with him all day long. Why didn't he see this? Don't let that type of thing happen, because we can kill morale. And we don't want to do that. We want to keep your team positive, keep them going, keep them taking care of your customers and servicing them at the level that you want your customer service. But boy, this has been an impactful topic.
Yes, it has. And hopefully none of our listeners have to ever deal with this to that extent. Maybe it's just people wanting an extra cup of coffee, and you can just change the policy and rein it in again and keep, seal the leak and have it not get to a criminal offense. But this is most of the time what starts off with just a little bit can escalate. And definitely any one person who has full control from start to end is someone to just make sure and have nice little guide rails on that for everyone involved.
Yes, it's always good to keep the temptation from ever becoming a temptation.
Exactly.
Because that person may be the most upright person in the world, the most friendly, the best employee you've ever had, but you don't know what's going on in their home life. You don't know what's going on in that personal life. Yeah. And they may just get pushed too far, just like in the case of that bookkeeper. They just got pushed enough that she started with a utility bill, a couple $100, no big deal. This was a big company, a couple $100. They'll never see it. Yeah. And landed her in prison. So yes, we hope that this will never, ever happen. And because we've done this podcast interview, I know you're all going to be paying attention, and you're going to be digging into your books a little bit more and asking for some reports and looking at your paid bills and some things like that, making sure that things are for the right address. If it's a utility bill, is it your office address or your shop? Those kinds of things. Just become more aware. And when we're aware, then we have less chance for something like this to happen.
Exactly.
Well, I'm going to say that's a wrap for this episode of the Profitable Home Services Podcast. Remember, it's not how much money you make, it's how much you keep. And I'd like to invite you to get a free digital copy of my Your Path to Profits book, which shares 9 profit boosting tactics that will transform your service business. All you have to do is head over to yourpathtoprofitbooks.com and get your free copy of that book. And before we go, Michelle, would you let our listeners know how they can find out more about you and your bookkeeping practice?
Absolutely. My bookkeeping practice is Sum of All Numbers, and you can go right to our website of sumofallnumbers.com, and it will tell you all about the things that we provide, the services that we provide, and there's a phone number there or an email for you to reach out.
And I would highly recommend Michelle's bookkeeping firm. We have worked together on a few projects over the years, and I know that they do a great job. And I'm happy to know that she's my friend, as well as she's bailed me out of a few situations where we didn't have the bandwidth to take on somebody. My first call is to Michelle. Do you have the bandwidth to take this on or not? So thank you so much for doing that for me and for helping me and helping the various home service businesses that I've run into that need somebody that we know and like and trust who can handle that piece of it for them.
Yeah. Thank you, Diane.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We're going to call this a wrap. Bye-bye.